Well, this is Al McCarn with another interview segment with Reunion Roadmap. And this time it is my great pleasure to go up to Gloucester, Virginia, and introduce someone who doesn't need introduction to Reunion Roadmap audience, and that would be Barry Phillips, my friend and brother and elder with B'nai Yosef North America. Barry, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me in, Al.
Yeah, we have been doing this for a long time. In fact, the Reunion Roadmap was begun just in the second year that BINA came into existence. And you, along with David Jones, have been consistently providing of your wisdom and understanding of the scriptures in our Midrash segments. But we haven't yet asked, how did Barry Phillips get to be Barry Phillips? So that's the question. Where should we start?
Wow. I guess at the beginning, it's a good place. I was raised by a very blue-collar, factory-working family. My mom and my dad both worked in factories in Martinsville in Virginia, which back then was an industrial hub of sorts. We had furniture factories and textile mills, and there was a DuPont plant there. And so it was filled with hardworking assembly line style people of one ilk or the other. My dad worked decades in furniture factory, never made a lot of money, worked hard. Matter of fact, he was raised with the idea of you outworked everybody around you. You never let anyone work harder or faster than you. And that was just the way he was raised. So even doing chores around the house, I would, help him out. He's going to do it or bust. It's just, hard at it. Mom worked on a sewing machine in a textile mill. That's where I had my first jobs after I graduated high school, etc. But my mom and dad raised us in a local Pentecostal church. And when I say Pentecostal, it was Pentecostal in the nth degree. A lot of childhood memories of explosive, quote unquote, worship services. That was just the only thing that I knew. So when I went to school out with my peers, everybody was either Baptist or what they called the local Christian church, which is very, very similar too. And I kind of hid my Pentecostal identity because I knew they wouldn't understand. We were careful about bringing friends with us to church. If we wanted to keep them as friends, they just wouldn't understand the style of worship that we were familiar with. But the thing that really shaped myself and my siblings, I have 3 siblings, was that what mom and dad professed to be on Sunday morning was exactly who they were during the week. I've been told, Barry, people don't understand what it's like to be raised as you were. Most people had a problematic, dysfunctional family. And so when you talk about this, they don't understand it. But I'm very blessed that, I grew up standing at mom's bedroom door and listening to my mom pray. We'd come in from outside, getting a drink of water, whatever, and look for mom, where's she at? And she's in the bedroom praying. I grew up listening to my dad pray. And when I say pray, I mean, it was a fervent, powerful style of praying. I remember as, 8, 6, 7, 8-year-old kid, Dad looking at me and say, son, would you like to go pray with me? At the end of our worship services, there was always an altar time of prayer. So I have those fond memories of my dad kneeling behind me in an altar with his arms around my chest and praying over me. That was a very powerful impression. So, the first Bible I ever had is the one my dad bought me. In the front cover, he wrote, read every day. And it was out of that Bible that I sat down and got fascinated with the story of David and read all of the exploits of him and all that went on, read the Gospels. And of course, Dad said, well, read the book of John. That's what everybody says to start with. One of the most profound sod level books in the scriptures. But that was just the way I was raised. As a teenager, I had the teenager experiences of trying to figure out, am I going to run with the crowd? Am I going to be true to my upbringing and to my knowledge of Yeshua, Jesus, as we called him then? Struggled back and forth, walked on both sides of the fence a bit. But when I was 16 years old, we were in revival. The evangelist was David St. John. And I don't know what he preached. It didn't matter. I was one of the only teenagers there. There was a lot of teenagers in the church, but in the middle of the week, I was the only one that I remember being there. And I remember sitting there on the pew thinking, am I going to do this or not? Am I going to live this life, or am I going to live according to what everyone else around me is doing? And so I made up my mind, whether anyone else my age will walk with me or not, this is what I'm going to do. And even though I'd had some childhood experiences, of prayer and salvation, this was the night that I went to an altar of prayer and said, this is it, Father. Tonight I choose you and nothing else. And if I have to walk this by myself out of my own age group, I will. Out of that, there were other young folks my age that began to follow my example. And we ended up with a very dynamic youth group, 20, 30 kids. I don't remember exactly how many. But we would have prayer meetings in the middle of the week together. We, fellowship together. And we were committed to walking out this experience. Is where I met my wife, Laura. She and her family began to attend. Not long after that, I was 18 years old. We were in another revival. And my heart was set on music in those days. I wanted to play music and sing. And that's what I envisioned myself doing for the Lord, that my capacity. Praying in an altar during the revival, I very clearly heard Yah's voice. I mean, it shocked me that I could hear it that clearly. And I was in the process of saying typical teenage prayers, whatever you want me to do, I'm yours, I'm here to serve you, etc. Those kind of, I'll do anything you ask me to do. And what I heard him say is, I have called you to preach and you refuse to do so. That's where I struggle with the reality of, of course, the first thing that comes to your mind is I'm going to end up being a missionary to some foreign weird place and I'm going to starve to death. Of course, as a teenager, that's all you think about is what's next to eat. But that was a night I said, Father, if you will go with me, if you will be with me, I'll do what you say. I will preach your word. But then I said, what about music? And he said to me, that will come later. So I went and told our pastor, I feel like I've been called to preach, quote unquote. First thing he did said, well, you need to get this book, How to Write Sermons. It was one of the most dull, boring, non-interesting books that I'd ever read. But he was trying to help me. Look, if you're going to get up and preach, then you need to know how you're going to do it. Whether you're going to preach by manuscript, you're going to take a text and use tales of stories and so forth. Well, I didn't have any stories, so I had to figure out something else. What kind of outline you're going to use, and that book ended up being a lot more helpful than I want to give it credit for. But you have to learn how to present what it is. Just because you're called to preach or teach doesn't mean that it's an automatic thing. It is a learned delivery mechanism where you can transfer your thoughts and understandings and then allow for the sudden input of the Ruach in the middle of all of that to take you into an area that you were not prepared for. I don't have to tell you what that's like, but you have to learn how to be the spoken word vessel.
Yeah.
That led to evangelism for a number of years. After I got married in 82, Laura and I had this idealistic vision of what an evangelist would be like, riding around in a Lincoln Town car wearing nice suits and preaching big revivals to huge crowds. None of that ever materialized. It happened for others, but it didn't happen for me.
I was just thinking perhaps that's a reason to rejoice.
Well, yeah, that's probably true. Served a short tenure as a youth pastor, and it was while I was in Fredericksburg, Virginia, as a youth pastor. I heard that unmistakable voice one day in prayer that says, "I'm going to put you as a pastor." I thought, "Oh, I don't want to be a pastor. That's old man, boring stuff. I really don't want to do that." I had no idea. But 30 days later, I'm pastoring our first church. We are, and it's small. I was told by our state overseer, it's a small congregation. It's got 40 people. They pay $2,000 a month in tithes. And in 1988, May of 1989, that was doable. When I got there, we had exactly half. We had, with my family of 4, we had 20. So I had 16 people and just under $1,000 a month in tithes, which meant this is going to be a struggle, because we not only needed to pay the needs of the church with the utilities, and we were renting a building and so forth, but I had to feed my family out of that. And my first thought was, Al, I'm going to do a lot of fasting because I won't be able to afford to eat. My family has to eat. So I'll feed my wife and my children, and I'll have to fast a lot.
Yeah.
That was 5.5 years. And it was a struggle. Small paper mill town, and very, very much depressed. A lot of demonism behind the scenes. A lot of satanic stuff going on that you wouldn't notice on Main Street, but it was there. But out of that, I'll share this. I was standing on the in the front of the church. We had these big windows. The sun was shining through the window on the front pew on the right-hand side, and I'm standing there in the sunlight, and I am proclaiming, "Father, I thank you that this church will be the beacon of your glory to this community." And that unmistakable voice came back to me, "If this church is the beacon of my glory to this community, woe to this community." You couldn't have hit me any harder with a sledgehammer. I sat on the front pew stunned. Why, Father? And he began to point out all the reasons why. Out of that, I learned my job was not to raise up the biggest, most happening thing in town. My job was to learn to partner with other pastors in the local community and region and pray. Because what Yah wanted to do there was bigger than one church with one explosive pastor doing a big thing. And ended up being a part of a pastoral prayer group of about 21 people from all kinds of denominations. And we prayed together every Wednesday. And we learned to pray together and to walk together and to have covenant level relationship with each other. That dramatically changed me, because then I realized Yah's bigger and about doing more than one thing, one church, one congregation, one individual, one ministry. Pastored a number of places, and we ended up here in Gloucester. We moved to Gloucester in January of 97, and took on a church where a pastor had retired, had some initial success. The church started growing. Some good things were happening. We developed a very strong spiritual warfare orientation. Again, Gloucester is a very old city. Being here on the east coast of Virginia, it was settled very, very early in our nation's history. The nation's freedom won at Yorktown. That battleground is about a mile from where we meet. Lots of history. The Powhatan Nation was centered here in Gloucester. A lot of old spiritual stuff.
Hmm.
So we developed a fourfold plan, vision, mission, and that was worship, warfare, discipleship, and deliverance. And we had prayer teams that met. We prayed through certain things. We prayed in a very strong spiritual warfare attack type mode. Was strong on trying to disciple people, instruct them. And we had deliverance ministry. We had many an occasion, we had people that would come in for prayer and they would start manifesting something. And fairly dramatic. And I had team members that immediately when that happened, they took them out of the sanctuary area into a side place. And there they conducted the ministry that they were trained in. And, I understand was we're not going to allow demons to grab attention and put on a show that's causing people to be distracted from the main event, which is to worship the King. You want to manifest? You go to a side room and we'll deal with that. But we're going to worship the King in here. And go ahead.
Barry, that was just your church there in Gloucester, or was that in partnership with others?
No, that was pretty much our local congregation.
Okay.
So we were constantly out praying for revival. We had this idea that, when I first came here, the Pensacola outpouring had just taken place. And that kind of river flowing, fire burning manifestation style thing, it happened here for 6 months. It was dramatic. And as powerfully as it went, it was like it just clicked and the spigot was turned off. And we started trying to figure out where is the spigot and how do we get it turned back on for several years. We were praying for revival. And again, his unmistakable voice came to me in the sanctuary one day as I was praying. And he said, Barry, I'm going to give you the revival that you've been praying for. But most of your people will be so offended by it, they will not receive it. And it's another one of those sit down on the front pew moments and wonder, what in the world am I getting into? What are you going to do? It was right after that, a lady in our congregation went to Israel on a tour, came back and is excited. And she came into my office one day and she handed me a pamphlet for Your Glory Ministries. And she said, you have to have these people come and speak here. I've invited them to Gloucester and I'm trying to get congregations to let them come and speak. And would you let them come and speak here? And I thought, as I'm looking through this pamphlet, I'm thinking, who are these people? And what is this? Well, it was about Israel. And in those days, this would have been about 1999, I guess. The term used was returning to your Jewish roots.
Yeah.
And I said, so when are they here? And it turns out, and I said, okay, I tell you what, they can come on Saturday night. We'll have a special Saturday night service. And in my mind, I'm thinking, if it's bad, I'll fix it in the pulpit on Sunday morning. So they came, and a part of the ministry team was Mike Clayton.
Oh, yes.
Okay. So the first night that they came in, big crowd, we got up, we started doing our worship routine. And at that point, worship meant people walking back and forth and dance with banners and flags. It was an active participant worship setting. And the main speaker was a lady. She was sitting on the front pew. Mike was more security, book sales, oversight, logistics, and that kind of thing. And I'll never forget, Mike walked in the back, was standing against the back wall. And within just a couple of moments, he was sitting on the front pew. And he told me later, he said, I realized real quick, this is not a back row church. So I was so impressed with what was shared that night that I said, can you speak Sunday morning? Then they spoke Sunday night. And then I opened up a special service on Monday night. So they did Saturday, Sunday, Sunday night, and Monday. And I was intrigued. I realized something's going on here. Out of that meeting began a relationship, and the revival that Yah gave to us in answer to our prayers was a Hebraic revival. It was a return to our root. I started teaching Torah portions on Wednesday night. I had no idea what I was doing. I just went to the first 5 books and started teaching it and digging in it. And I didn't realize how much was there. Yah was right. Most of my congregation was so offended by the Jewishness of things that they refused to hear it. So 2002 in May, I am in my backyard. I'm praying. I'm seeking him. And I hear that unmistakable voice again. And I can quote verbatim, when you come out, do not recreate what you come out of. So I'm stunned. Father, I didn't know I was coming out. Am I leaving the church? And I'm not to recreate church. What am I supposed to do? What is this? I had finally achieved in our denomination a level of what would be called success. I was known by the peers in our state of Virginia. That was the way our denomination was organized, by state. I was completing my 4th year on a board in our state for youth. I was recognized. People knew my name. At our state meetings, people wanted to talk to me a bit. I had visions of going to higher boards and doing bigger things. You reach this place where nobody knows you. Now everybody knows you. I had a rapport with the state overseer. Things were moving up, and now Yah says, you're leaving. So I finished my obligations through that summer. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I'm not going to be here much longer, but I just don't know when. In August of that year, this is in August of 2002. Again, I'm in my backyard. I'm careful about praying in my backyard these days. And I'm praying, and I hear his voice say to me, you have until the 1st of Tishri to get out. Didn't know when Tishri was. So I went into the house, went to the computer, looked it up. It meant I had 2 weeks.
Oh, my.
We had just moved into our house in 98. I had 2 teenage daughters, a house payment, car payment, bills and requirements like everyone else. I had no other income other than my pastoral income. My wife worked at the local bank here, but that was it. What am I going to do? I did the only thing I knew how to do. I started crafting my letter of resignation, made an appointment to see our overseer. And I drove to Roanoke, about a 3.5-hour ride, met with the overseer and read him a resignation letter in his hearing. And I'll never forget what he told me. He said, Barry, we know we have a problem. We being the church, not just the Church of God as a denomination, but churchdom at large, all denominations. He said, we have a problem. We're losing 3,000 churches a year more than we can start. We're going in the whole 3,000 churches a year. And the problem is we don't know why. And I realized, okay, Father, you're getting me off of a sinking ship. But you're putting me in a small rowboat here and I don't know what to do.
Hmm.
I didn't know what I was going to do for money. I didn't have a job. I was just trusting him. Out of that was birthed House of David. Got phone calls. Someone said, will you come and speak at our house? When I got there, there were 60 people in the living room. And out of that, we birthed House of David and had our first service, if you will, in early September 2002. So that's the short version.
Yeah.
But there is a part in the middle here. I had called for a conference, and we had Mike and his ministry to come that he was a part of. And out of that, they raised money to send Laura and I to Israel. This would have been January of 2001. As I share this, I'm remembering things. Just a month prior, December 2000, I'm in my bedroom praying, and I'm praying for revival, and I'm saying to the Father, I want you to show me who you are, Yeshua. I'm preaching Yeshua at this time. Show me who you are, not with a book, not with a tape, not with a CD of some sort. I want you to show me who you are and what you see by allowing me to see with your eyes. When you look at me, when you look at the church, when you look at ministry, when you see the U.S., when you see Israel, what do you see? So in January, the next month, we have this conference. Money's raised. Laura and I are going to Israel. I don't have a passport.
Hmm.
So, of course, this is before 9/11, thankfully. I have 10 days to get a passport for Laura and I. And we managed to make 2 trips to Washington, D.C. and get it done. We're on the plane. We land in Israel. We land, put our feet on the ground, and start crying. Don't know why. We cried everywhere we went. And I was sitting on Ben Yehuda Street watching people. I loved it. Laura shops. I sit in the middle of the mall or the shopping center, whatever, and I just watch people. I find them fascinating. Not creepy, I'm just fascinated by them. And I'm sitting in this pedestrian street watching everyone go back and forth. And I happened to notice a man, it was an Orthodox man with the traditional garb of the black suit, hat, long beard, and so forth. And I'm just watching this man and his, how he conducts himself. And it dawns on me. The one that I call Savior and Messiah is more like him than he is me. And my mouth hung open and I realized, Yeshua, I knew you were a Jew. I didn't know you were Jewish. And I'm going through this realization process of his culture, his language, his history, his future, his worldview. Everything about him is Jewish. And I was dumbfounded. The second thing it hit me, that proverbial sledgehammer hit me again, was I'm preaching an American Messiah who sees the world as I do and understands it as I do. I'm interpreting scriptures and his words through an American mindset. And with that moment, my prayer in December was answered. My Western Greco-Roman glasses were taken off, and Yah gave me Hebrew glasses instead. On my way home on the plane, I just keep thinking to myself, I've got to start all over again. I got to go back to the book and start reading it through the culture that it was written in, the worldview that it was written in, with a Hebrew lens. And it radically changed my preaching. I remember going back to the pulpit and thinking, I don't know what to say. I can't just preach what I've always been preaching because that's an American gospel. I need to preach what the word says and its authentic perspective. I got to reveal my Messiah as the Jew that he is, who is Jewish. People didn't like that. You're doing away with our Jesus and you're replacing him with this Yeshua guy, and we're not accustomed to that. So that's kind of where the floorboards began to warp until the whole thing fell apart. I realized I need to get out of here and let this group of people and this denomination do what it is that they believe they're called to do, and I got to go do what I'm called to do. So, one other part of this, and then I'll start answering your questions that you might have. Right after we started House of David in September 23, within a month or two, Mike is and the For Your Glory ministry is back here, and the lady that was the forefront of that ministry, we're getting ready to leave. We're sitting in just down the hall here in our living room. They've got to go catch a plane. Luggage is already in the car. And she sits on the couch and she looks at me and hands me an envelope, one of these syllable envelopes. And it's half-inch thick set of paper. And she said, I need to say this to you. It appears that the last thing that we need to deal with is the identity of the Messiah. And she relates to me how that Yeshua has appeared to her in her bedroom and told her that the last thing that has to change, because we were changing a lot of things in those days, is that he is not to be worshiped. He was saying to her, I'm just a man. I am the Messiah, but I'm just a man and I'm not to be worshiped. I'm stunned. I'm shocked. She hands me this packet of paper and just says to me, just read this. And with that, her and Mike get up and they walk out the door and go and get in the car and go and get on a plane. I'm thinking, I gave up everything that was security for me. I gave up the acceptance of my peers. I gave up my job. I gave up the security of a paycheck. I'm not sure how I'm going to make mortgage payments here. And now you tell me Yeshua is just a man? And I start reading this information. And the more I read, the madder I got. Now, I didn't know whether to be mad because I was deceived, mad because this is junk, mad because she dumped this on me. I didn't know why I was mad. I was just mad. And I remember one afternoon, I'm sitting here and I'm reading through this stuff and I'm trying to think, what am I going to say to my people on Shabbat? This doesn't make any sense to me. And I grabbed the papers and with my right hand, I just slung them and they went flying down the hall. I got up and went into the bedroom and I grabbed the scriptures and I started shaking it at the ceiling. And again, I'm mad, so I'm praying mad. And I start yelling at the heavens. I didn't ask, I said, you're going to show me who Yeshua is. Don't you send me a teacher. Don't you send me a book. I don't want a tape. I started shaking the scriptures at him. I said, you show me in this book who Yeshua is. I have to know from your word. Who is Yeshua? Is he just a man? Is he you? Is he a part of you? Is he divine in deity or is he just a human being? Do I worship him or not worship him? Because I've been trying to repent for worshiping Yeshua and it wasn't working. And that unmistakable voice says, read Isaiah. Jumped up, ran to my chair, Isaiah chapter 1, verse 1. And those familiar with that, you realize, okay, my sins are like scarlet and they're washed, okay, salvation, I got that part. What is this? I get to Isaiah chapter 9, and I read a familiar verse in verse 6, and I'll read it here. For a child is born unto us, a son is given unto us, and the rule is on his shoulder. And his name is called Wonder, Counselor. Then it says Strong El, Mighty God, Mighty El. This translation says father of continuity. And I looked that up and it said Aviad. And Al, when I saw that, I didn't have to get down to Prince of Peace. I never made it that far. When I saw that he was El Gibor, I went and started looking this up. He is El Gibor and Aviad. I was dancing in the living room floor, hollering to the top of my lungs, I know who you are. I know who you are. That verse settled me. And it was the fact that the scriptures told me who he was. I didn't go back and read any more of that information. And I realized I'm just going to have to disagree with someone that's been a mentor to me. They're wrong and the word is right. Yeshua is not just a man. This is a child that is born. And I knew that there were some were saying, well, this is the child of a king of Israel. And it was a prophecy. But a child of a king, an earthly king, is not called Aviad, and he is not El Gibor.
Amen.
There is only one that refers to. He's the everlasting Father. There's only one. The child's name is Everlasting Father. That settled it for me. And that relationship rapidly deteriorated for me and for Mike Clayton.
Mm.
And Mike left that whole thing and called me up on the phone and he said, I need your help. We've got to get Yeshua back in the middle of this thing. And there has been a partnership between he and I then for 20 years. And that purpose, putting Yeshua back in the middle of things. So House of Davis just celebrated this past year our 20th anniversary. We're still here. Yah is developing ministry. I worked a secular side job at a music store for 10 years in 2014. I remember praying on my back porch. I didn't make it to the backyard. I was on my back deck. And I was complaining. And I was saying something to the tune of, Father, I am tired of fruitlessness. I've sown seed, and I'm tired of no fruit. And that unmistakable voice says, sow your seed in better ground. And I realized that the ground that I had been sowing some seed in through that job was worn out. Out of that, we birthed Remnant of Israel online ministry. It was a frustrating first year in 2014 to 2015 to see that get off the ground. My expectations didn't pan out, but eventually I did 5 or 6 years of podcasting and radio broadcast on Hebrew Nation Radio. Out of that, I started doing videos online. So now there's almost 1,000 videos on my Remnant of Israel YouTube channel. Done some conference speaking, been here, done that kind of thing. And in 2015?
Well, 2015 was the first B'nai Yosef Congress, and Bina was established the following year.
So in 2016, I was completely overwhelmed to be nominated as an elder with B'nai Yosef. And I'll never forget the conference that we had in St. Petersburg, Florida. And the signing of the Articles of Declaration. I wonder if there's tears. I was crying all over that. I probably put smudges all over those papers, those documents.
Along with the smudges all the rest of us were putting on it.
That gathering was one of the most powerful things that I've ever been a part of in my life. So there have been these, entering into now our 7th year as a part of B'nai Yosef North America, Remnant of Israel, House of David, and Yah's put more on my plate than I know what to do with. So there's the what was it now? I guess the 30-minute version, a 40-minute version of my life.
The condensed version. And Barry, it's been a joy to walk with you for the last 7 years with B'nai Yosef. I guess the question would be for this movement at large, which I call the Torah awakening. We could call the restoration of Israel's two houses, the regathering of Ephraim. That's what B'nai Yosef of North America is all about. The regathering and reconciliation of the house of Joseph here in North America. This is a bigger process than any of us can imagine. And we have little bits of it that connect with other people and the little bits that they have. Where's this going next? What do you see in the next 5 years, say, for this movement at large?
A couple of things I see is an exposure out of necessity, necessary exposure. I had always imagined up until a few years ago that there must be, I don't know, here in America, 1 million or so of us. And we got, as elders, we began to discuss that at one point, and thinking of all the congregations that we're aware of, totaling them all up together, it came to a shocking realization that we might have 25, on an extreme level, 30,000 of us. There's not 1 million Hebrew roots folks in America. Maybe in the world, maybe. But here in America, we are so minuscule in our existence. It's no wonder no one knows who we are. Now, if you add in Messianic congregations that are more traditional MJAA alliance style things, then you can burgeon that number a bit. But as far as, again, the House of Israel and its existence and its various emanations and forms, there's just not that many of us yet. Somehow, by some system of events, I don't know what they are, someone who has better understanding of the schedule of things and where we might be, and the huge argument or debate as to where we're at in the scheme of Yah's timetable and how things are going to go, may understand what those events might be. But somehow I'm thinking that there's going to be a need of us, that we're going to be called on to supply some level of ministry, answering of questions, some perspective of scripture revelation that's going to make sense to some very troubled people. For example, and this is, again, it's debatable, and so I'm not trying to upset anyone's apple cart if you believe differently than this, but from my perspective, perhaps we get to a place where those who hold to a premillennial rapture of the church, where everyone escapes tribulation level events, and we're just not here for that. When tribulation level events begin to take place and people are not out of here, if they panic and their pastors can't answer why, they may be going to someone else, either in a panic or in a frenzy. I thought, I didn't think we would see this. I didn't think we would experience this. What am I supposed to do? It may be then that we can say, well, let's go back to the scriptures and take a look at it from a different angle and understand that the kingdom's coming here. And we got to be prepared for kingdom living here rather than escaping to something else. Prior to his death, my dad took me into the bedroom, pulled out his Bible, and he went to Matthew chapter 24. And he began to show me with his finger. He said, wars, rumors of wars, and down that list of end time events. And then he goes over to the middle of the next column, and it says, then the Son of Man will appear. And he starts pointing to all this other stuff. And he said, we're going to have to go through that, aren't we? I said, yeah, Dad, we are. And with that, he just shook his head and closed the Bible. And that was the answer he was looking for. He began to realize a lot of the things that he had been told that we would escape, we're actually going to experience. Because the word says he doesn't show up until after these events take place. That may be unsettling for some folks. Maybe that's what will be. I don't know. But I think out of necessity that there's going to be an exposure and a revelation of who we are. And then with that, Al, I'm praying and I believe Yah for credibility.
Yeah.
That we would not be a people with flighty explanations or some kind of weird stuff from out on the fringe, but that we would actually have scriptural, solid, dependable answers. And people can look at the word and say, I didn't realize that's what it said. But you're right, there it is. That's what I need to know. So we need to be a credible people. For us to come to that place, we can't wait until whenever that might be. We need to be preparing ourselves now.
I would submit that a lot of that preparation is already happening.
I believe so.
Yeah. And we do have the solid scriptural answers. Perhaps what is going on now and why we look around and, we talked about this, the elders, the admin council at Bina have all talked about it. Why is there no traction with this and that program that we've looked for or tried? I think you have hit on it. And there is a need to have that credibility, that grounding in the word, that kingdom vision of Israel's restoration. That needs to be something that wells up from deep within us, because it's not that we know it, it's we're living it out.
When a young person needs an answer, they will go to their peers. But when they really are serious about an answer, they will go to their elders, to the previous generations. They'll go to their parents, grandparents, someone they know that's been seasoned, that they're mature and they're stable. Yeah. You don't want to depend on someone who can barely keep his head above water to save you from drowning. You want someone who is a seasoned swimmer that knows what they're doing.
Amen.
So I look around the Bina people, and more gray hair is showing up, and the years are adding up a bit. But at the same time, I'm realizing the elders, not just the role of elders, but those who are in an elder generation. And you don't have to be in a Bina leadership to be referenced here. Those that have been through it, those that have had to pray their way through issues, tragedies, those that have been teaching the word for a long time, that have seen people grow and mature, that exhibit maturity themselves, a sense of stability, a sense of joy in the midst of hardship. Those are the ones that the folks are going to start leaning on. So it would behoove us that are a part of that generation to remain grounded ourselves. We don't need to be the one with angry diatribes on social media. Mm. We don't need to be the ones that are accused of infighting or financial missteps. We want credibility. We want a sincere and stable walk, because when people need us the most, we need to be qualified. Amen. We need to have that example of maturity, that example of righteousness, and of a right mindset. We're not here to count you as a number. We're here to grow you as a person. And people are tired of being counted.
Seems to me there's something in Torah about that.
I believe there's a few things in Torah about that, and a few historical examples given as well. So growing people instead of counting their numbers is important.
Amen. Well, I think we'll have to leave it there, Barry, because we serve the God who created time, but he gives us only a limited amount. But thank you very much, Barry Phillips, pastor at House of David and elder of B'nai Yosef North America, and shall we say, wise teacher and counselor of Remnant of Israel. Thank you for sharing your story with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.